What's the most absurd fact that sounds fake but is actually true? Out of all the animals in the world, the most successful hunter by far, with a stunning success rate of 95%, is the dragonfly. If those things were big enough, they'd be a viable threat to most other creatures. They can also accelerate at 4 gm to force and corner at 9 gm. Tail dragonfly is basically an F1 drive. Holy shit, I never thought about that. I've always admired how sharp and precise they fly, but I'd never considered what they're built to ensure by being able to do the kind of abrupt airborne maneuvers they make. They can predict and plot an intercept course for an insect that's already in flight. Is that meant to be particularly impressive or unusual? Yes. That level of spatial reasoning is astounding for an insect, considering that primates had to develop a similar internal brain system to throw things accurately. Ever wondered how you can kind of just guess how much force you need to put into throwing something? It's actually quite incredible. For an insect to have that kind of ability is crazy as hell, man. Found this out while working at a vet clinic. A sloth takes so long to digest food that it can starve to death on a full stomach. Nature is just weird sometimes. Haha, that sounds like a terrible evolutionary hack. Evolution itself is a hack, we're all buggy. From looking into this, it's not because digestion takes so long. That would be such a deleterious trait, I can't imagine it persisting beyond a generation or two. It's temperature-based. They are very poor thermoregulators, for mammals anyways. And if they get too cold, apparently their gut biome can die and they can no longer extract the necessary nutrients. There's a species of jellyfish called Turritopsis dohrnii, also known as the immortal jellyfish, I had to Google the name LOL, that can literally reverse its aging process. When it's injured, sick, or even just stressed, it reverts its cells back to their earliest form, essentially starting its life over again. It's like the creature figured out how to cheat death, hitting the reset button on its existence. Crazy IMO. About 2/3 of your human ancestors are female. It's because of pedigree collapse, where you should have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 GT grandparents, etc. So, going back about 30 generations, i.e. the Middle Ages, you should have 1 billion ancestors, which is more people than even existed. In reality, as you go back in your family tree, the same people start to appear multiple times. For example, anyone with any English blood will have King Edward I as an ancestor on dozens of separate lines because of his many children, including bastards. The flip side of this is that many more males than females leave no descendants at all. This is an interesting comment among many interesting comments. I want to know more. Egypt is older than a lot of people realize. There were archaeologists in ancient Egypt. I think the fact was that Egypt has been around so long that they had archaeologists whose speciality was ancient Egyptian history. There was a museum in ancient Babylon. Archaeological survey realized they were looking at a museum when they found objects dated to 2,000 years apart and labeled. The way I heard was that Cleopatra lived closer in time to cell phones than she did to the age of the pyramids. Some people get shocked she lived during the same time, late Roman Republic. Which is pretty ridiculous because the reason she is famous is because of her affairs with Caesar and Antonius, and because she was last pharaoh of Egypt, which was then added as part of Roman Empire by Augustus. But this is partly due to Hollywood always having her in wrong costumes. She should be dressed like a Hellenistic monarch with some inspirations of the Greek goddesses. She was very Greek. She might have worn some Egyptian-inspired dress in religious ceremonies, and Egyptian jewelry and such. She did not dress like ancient Egyptian-inspired Vegas girl. Some companies are over 1,000 years old, 90% of them are in Japan. What do? A quick look shows that many of the oldest Japanese companies are hotels, with some dealing in confectionery or religious goods. Many of the oldest European companies are in the alcohol business. Link to Wikipedia is on description. Sharks have been on the planet longer than trees. I've heard that a T-Rex is closer in history to humans than to a Stegosaurus. True. Dinosaurs roamed the planet for so long that Trex was walking on Stegosaurus fossils. Hey man, did you already subscribe on me? You don't? Subscribe and press like faster. Yeah, sharks have been around for over 400 million years, while trees only showed up about 350 million years ago. Guess they really perfected the survival of the fittest thing. Sharks have also been around longer than Saturn's rings. There was a shipwreck in 1664, a shipwreck in 1785, and a shipwreck in 1820. Each had one survivor. Each survivor was named Hugh William. Was it the same Hugh Williams, and did he survive because he suffers from immortality? Hugh Williams was a jellyfish, obviously. I see a lot of octopus facts, but what I find most interesting besides their intelligence and hearts is that they only live about 3 years. They mate once and die. It's theorized that that's the reason they're just animals. If they had longer lives, it isn't unlikely that they would have evolved further and possibly became a sapient species. Do they live longer in captivity like other animals? I know they escape from captivity a bunch. Should we help the octopodes live longer? Would this be humanity's downfall? Some don't live long in captivity, and even ones that do well are only expected about 5. Although there is a species that might live to 18 in the deep, but I don't think he's coming up here anytime soon. An interesting thing. This isn't universally true. The most interesting exception is the genus Argonauta. These special little ladies have modified the material most octopuses make their egg cases out of into a papery substance which they use to build a shell-like structure, which gives them one of their common names: paper nautili. Female argonauts are iteroporous, meaning they can reproduce multiple times throughout their lives. The males are one and done, though. Typical. Honeybees can recognize human faces. Low-key terrifying knowing they remember who wronged them. They're out there keeping receipt. Crows do this too. I try to make friends with every crow I encounter. I never know when that will be paid back in kind. Sometimes when I'm walking my dogs, I'll lightly toss some treats about halfway to a crow. I am so absolutely terrified that they're going to pick me to have a blood vendetta against that I feel like I have to pay protection money. That cigarette lighters were invented before matches. In a related fact, it took around 50 years after the can was invented to invent the can opener. In the meantime, a hammer and chisel were used. The last wild cow died in 1627. Wait, of course they used to be wild, but I never thought about it. Yeah, they were really impressive animals. The aurochs, the last one hunted in Poland in the 17th century, averaged 6 feet, about 2 meters at the shoulder, with about a 1 meter span for the horns. That was the animal we domesticated cows from. I worked on dairy farms as a teen and went to plenty of agricultural fairs and still do. I have never seen a bull that is 6 foot at the shoulder. That would be a terrifying monster. The atoms in your body are around 13 billion years old. They aren't yours, they've been here as long as life itself. You're just the latest assembly. Depends on how far down you want to go, I guess. We're all 65% water by weight, and the hydrogen that is part of that H2O was created just 380,000 years after the Big Bang, meaning it's practically 13.7 billion years old. However, since hydrogen is just composed of a proton and an electron, the protons that makes up the nucleus of those hydrogen atoms goes all the way back to just 20 microseconds after the Big Bang. I think 13 billion is mind-blowing enough, but I completely see the point. I just want to top-line that fact safely. The fact everything in body has existed as longer, as physical consciousness humbles me and keeps the bullshit in perspective. 46 BC was the longest year in human history, 445 days. 2020 lasted at least 10 years. It was a real shitstorm. And also 2023 came directly after 2019. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists have actually found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are over 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible. Its low moisture content and acidity act as natural preservatives, preventing bacteria and mold from growing. Pretty wild, right? Some octopuses can lobotomize themselves if they don't chew their food properly. I can imagine a Far Side comic strip with a daddy octopus telling Junior to be sure to chew his food properly. Ireland's population is still lower than it was pre-potato famine. Also, fun fact, we prefer to refer to it as the Great Hunger. Yes, Ireland had a potato blight, but we were still producing lots of other food. It was just all being exported under British reign, who also sabotaged aid from other countries. Thanks! I'll admit I didn't know that. Irish people called it the Great Hunger. I also appreciate you adding additional context. Obviously, my post was a fairly simple answer to the prompt, but more info is always welcome. The moose natural predator is the orca whale. For those wondering what's going on, moose are great swimmers and will swim in the ocean from between islands and the mainland. They also dive to feed on seaweed. The entirety of Wikipedia can be downloaded, and the total file size is smaller than the latest Call of Duty. Most fish don't fart, but herring do. A study found they likely communicate via farting. It's like their own version of social media. Instead of Twitter, it's Squeaker. Fartbook, wondrous. Birds cannot taste spice. This is actually why peppers evolved. The spice would keep other animals away, so only birds would eat them and spread their seeds. Then humans came along and decided this hurts good and made them much more powerful than they would be in nature. To elaborate a bit, rodents would chew the fruits up, grinding up the seeds, while birds don't. So, birds digest the fruit and poop the seeds out whole. Female kangaroos start off with 2 vaginas. During their birthing process, they develop a 3rd vagina. That didn't go the direction I expected. Acid in pineapples can break down dissolved meat, theoretically flesh. Food scientist here. It's not acid, it's an enzyme called bromelain present in the pineapple that break down proteins. This is why your mouth hurts a bit when you eat a bunch of it, raw as it denatures quickly when cooked. It's because it's pulling an Uno reverse card and eating your mouth as your mouth eats it. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe about interesting facts you know. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.